All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Let me move some things around. Okay. So, you have read Langston Hughes' Thank You, Ma'am. All right. And so, as you've read Thank You, Ma'am, and by now you've done some annotating and you've done some highlighting and you've gone through and you kind of have a good understanding of the story. The next thing that we're going to do is discuss setting. Now, I know that you guys have already learned setting. You know that setting is a time, place, and what's happening in the story and how it's affecting everything. So you've learned that on the simple terms. Simple terms meaning fourth grade, I think, is the first time you probably discussed a setting. But here, what we're going to do is we're going to expand on those terms. And we're going to answer the questions of setting and how it affects what's happening in the story. So I want you to take a look at this anchor chart here. And we know that setting is the time and place and environment of a story. Okay. But what we're going to do is when we're talking about time, we're not necessarily going to talk about time in terms of whether it's morning or whether it's evening or whether it's sunny or whether it's midnight or time in terms of that. The time that we want to discuss at this point is when this took place, meaning the time period. Because as we found out, that time period plays a big part in terms of how our characters are. So characters that you have in 2000 will not act the same as characters that you have in 1958, which is exactly when our story took place. So you have to keep in mind that walking down the street in 2000 is not the same as walking down the street in 1958. So those characters will react completely different. We know that there may not have been street lamps then. So maybe a dark street at 11 o'clock at night is much different. Next, we're going to talk about place. Now, we know that our story took place in a city. But what if it took place in a cabin? Or what if it took place in a small town? There are a lot of things to consider when you're looking at place and where a story is happening. Because what can happen in a small town won't necessarily be the same as what happens in a city. So we really want to consider that when we're reading through this story as well. Now, the other component of setting is the environment. And our environment is the what. The what, is it rainy? Is it breezy? Is it dark? Is it sunny? Is it hot? Is it cold? So the environment, as winter in Chicago is freezing as opposed to winter in Texas. Yeah, it gets cold, but it's not freezing. So a man walking down the street briskly in Chicago is going to be a lot different than a man walking down the street briskly in Texas or in Los Angeles for that matter, where we know winter in Los Angeles, it drops down to about 60 degrees. So our settings play a big part of any story that we read. It gives us information on how the characters are going to react because on a larger scale, if you're talking about 1958, is a woman able to walk down the street by herself? Is that something that's considered the norm? You know, can they walk alone? So those things are things that you want to consider because things that have happened at that time aren't necessarily how we look at it now. Okay, so you want to consider what is the setting of the story in terms of when, where, and what. Okay, so we want to know how this setting is affecting what's happening. Okay, how does it impact the characters in the story? This is about a young black kid. Now, a young black kid in 1958 snatching a woman's purse, walking down the street in the dark, isn't going to have the same outcome as a young black kid walking down the street here and committing a crime. So that's something that you have to think about. And also, you want to say, how do the characters react in the story? And how are they impacted by the setting? So we're going to dive, really deep into setting at this point. And I want you to pick a color. So you're either going to pick yellow or teal or the pink. And I want you to go back and reread through the story and highlight for setting. We're looking for setting and we're answering these questions. So you're going to highlight for setting in that one color. I want you to use one color. Okay? So I look forward to seeing what you guys do. It's going to be right in this Google document that's going to be attached to this. And I want you to go through and enjoy your reading. All right, guys, have a great afternoon.